couple minutes. So we're on there. Center, and we should be able to see as people are joining. I guess let's give it a couple minutes. See, these are viewers. Okay. All right.
Okay.
All right, I think we're live now. Hello out there, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Dr. Molly Sauerwein, Inspire Integrative Medicine. I have with me today Dr. Rich Bernstein, and we are here to do a quick chat with everyone about this new clinical research initiative through a coalition with the Privia Medical Group, local practices, and Javara Research. We wanted to take time to do this session to really just outreach to our patient population, to just answer some questions and give a brief overview, since this is a new initiative for all of us, and I've heard a lot of my patients have some questions about it. So we want to just take this time to put something out there just to talk about what this is, what clinical research is, what our involvement's like, what your involvement can be like, and how it might benefit you. So I'm going to turn things quickly over to Dr. Bernstein. He has been kind of the lead within the Annapolis area for our local practices in this research initiative, and just going to talk briefly again about kind of what clinical research is, and how we can all get involved and benefit, and the benefits both to us personally, and I think in general, what I think is really cool about it is how it benefits just, the advancement of clinical science and clinical research. I'm pretty excited to be involved as a new extension of my expertise and my skills, not only in providing patient care, but being able to contribute to the advancement of medicine and science and new therapeutics for all of us. So with that, Rich, let me turn it over to you and kind of
Thanks,
talk to
Molly.
us.
Well, thanks. Just a few things. So why did Privia get involved with clinical research? And I think there are a few reasons. Number one would be that it provides an increased access to care for patients who may not have that level of care available to them. For example, right now we have an asthma study we're doing which involves medication that patients might not otherwise have available to them. Two, it provides a higher level of care for patients. For example, in one of our trials right now, our Moderna RSV clinical trial, if a patient were to get sick, instead of simply doing like a swab, for a rapid test, we would do a PCR test for COVID, for RSV, for flu, and for basically 7 or 8 other viruses. So the clinicians or the doctors involved in the care have access to information that they wouldn't otherwise have access to. And then finally, there are times when patients actually can't afford medications, and through clinical trials, we can get patients access to medications. So that being said, I think it's important to understand what is a clinical trial, and basically research medicine is different from clinical medicine in that there are a lot of rules. There are a lot of specific rules that are outlined by the Food and Drug Administration. And usually for a drug to come to market, the first thing that has to happen is there's a preclinical trial. But the second thing is there what's called a phase 1 trial. And in this trial, they're really looking for efficacy of the medication and safety. And then assuming that the information is good, then they do what's called a phase 2 trial. And in a phase 2 trial, you're looking at what's the optimal dose of the medication and also looking at safety. And then by the time it gets to what's called a phase 3 trial, pretty much we know that it's going to be safe, but you're looking at a large group of patients. For example, with most of the COVID trials that were done for the messenger RNA vaccines, there were about 40,000 people in that clinical trial. So you're really looking more for safety. Now, with Privia, with our research initiative, we only do phase 3 trials, or a phase 4 trial, which would be with a drug that's already FDA approved. But a phase 3 trial we know that pretty much that drug is going to be safe, and so we're only doing research, when we are convinced that research will be in the best interest of our patient population.
So I know a lot of patients, as part of this initiative, have been getting some outreach. So we're involved in a number of clinical trials. They're constantly changing. We're not going to get into the specifics of that today, but as a member of our medical practices and some of the other local practices within the Privia Medical Group, there has been some outreach. So you may receive a phone call if you are eligible for one of these phase 3 trials, just to see if you have any interest in participating. I think one thing we want to highlight is that your participation is always voluntary, and certainly want you to feel comfortable with the scope of the trial and what the involvement might be. But we're very, very careful of what we are selecting for the trials that we're participating in, because we really feel that, one, it benefits our patient population, it benefits, I think, the scientific community, and they're really kind of good options for all of us to consider. We're always happy to answer questions about it. If you get a phone call and don't understand what the involvement is, either you can reach out to your provider directly. There also is a Annapolis Clinical Research Hub staff there that know all the ins and outs of what the involvement in the trial would look like. But what I kind of really want to highlight more, kind of my excitement about being part of it, is that to have this opportunity to be a part of research. I just think, as a practicing clinician, it's not something we really get to do in our everyday life. And I think it's really kind of neat. And I feel like, particularly after going through this pandemic and seeing how these new vaccines and therapeutics came to be available to all of us so quickly, it feels nice to be a part of that effort to kind of do this in other avenues of healthcare as well.
It is. And a great example of that, I think, was one of the trials that we did, not in this area, but in Chevy Chase, which was a pediatric COVID vaccine trial, where there was tremendous participation, because obviously a lot of parents wanted to have their kids to have access to the COVID vaccine, and they were able to do that before the vaccine was released through this trial. I think that, to your point, I think that it is sort of fun to be involved in research, and the investigator meetings are fun and very interesting to see sort of what's happening, at the clinical level, and sort of understand the science. And I think it helps us stay engaged at the forefront of medicine, which I think helps all of our patients. The more knowledgeable we are and the more engaged we are, I think the better we are as physicians.
Yeah, absolutely. So seeing new applications of sometimes existing drugs, or new development of even new therapeutics that are certainly maybe safer and even more beneficial for the conditions that we treat every day, it's pretty cool to be involved in that at this stage. Can you talk a little bit more about, you had mentioned kind of the benefits of being involved in clinical research? Because I think a lot of people at first, you get a call, oh, you want to be a part of a clinical research trial, and you think, what? No, I don't want to be part of any test drug, and what am I signing up for? It kind of makes you feel kind of a little uneasy. But there are, I think, a lot of benefits to being part of the trial. You had mentioned a little bit about access to care and additional testing. Can you talk a little bit more about what that might look like?
Well, I think that first of all, the patients so far that have participated in our clinical trials, the feedback has been universally positive. I like to say it's sort of like going to the doctor's office and getting a pedicure at the same time. I mean, it's sort of like there's so many people that are engaged in your care. I haven't had a pedicure, but I hear they're wonderful.
Wonderful.
There's so many people that are engaged in your care and are looking out for you, that you're actually being watched a lot more closely than you would if you were just coming to the doctor's office. And we've obviously had some patients where they got sick with COVID, and the first interaction was actually with the research site. And then the doctor was notified. So I think that overall, patients are very, very happy. And as I mentioned before, the type of trials we're doing, we know that they're pretty much, these drugs are pretty good to begin with, or it's a pretty good trial, and we feel it's going to be in our patient's best interest. We're not, looking, this isn't like a cancer trial where you're taking a drug that may have really bad side effects, and we don't know if it's going to work. It's a different type of trial.
Right. Particularly, as you mentioned, it's a phase. All of the trials we're involved with are phase 3 studies. So the safety has already been determined, and it's really studying kind of the more widespread use and efficacy.
Exactly.
So I think that hopefully is rest assured. The trials that we involve with are going to constantly be changing. This is a new initiative that just started really this year. So it's going to be building going forward. The trials are changing as different ones start enrollment and close, and we enter into new trials. So we'll do our best to make that information available. I think most of the participating providers have informational brochures about ongoing trials within their offices. And again, you may receive outreach about that as well that hopefully explains the ins and outs as well.
So one thing I want to bring up that is a little bit different about clinical research is that we can't just give information to patients, about what's going on. That in every phase of clinical research, there's what's called an investigational review board. And an investigational review board is a board that's put together from a diverse group of individuals that is really, they have but one goal, and that is to look out for the safety of patients. So we can't put out any written information unless it's put out and unless it's approved by an investigational review board. We can't talk about any studies that may be down the pike, which there are a few that I'd love to talk about because we don't have the approval from an investigational review board to talk about them yet. So I think that a lot of the whole concept of investigational review boards, and this is getting a little bit off topic, sort of started in the 1970s with the Belmont study, and that came out, because of the abuses that occurred in clinical research. So I just want to reassure everyone that at this point in time, that's really not an issue, that the safety of patients is paramount in any type of research study.
Yeah, everything is so tightly regulated and reviewed and studied. And so while it gives us some limitations in making sure that we're giving appropriate information, it's all in sight of having safety for all the patients and people involved. So I think with that, I'm going to look and see if there's anyone out there that has any specific questions. We'll kind of open it up for kind of general questions and answers, unless there's anything else that you wanted to touch on that
No.
So let me see. I gotta scroll up a little bit here and see. Certainly, anyone who's out there, if you have a specific question, you're welcome to post it in the Q&A session, and we're happy to address those right now. So let me see what we got out here. So we have a question here. What happens if a person has a negative reaction to a trial? Would our own health insurance cover the cost for, or would the trial? How would that work? So a negative, an adverse outcome during a trial, is that covered by health insurance or through the clinical trial? So that's a good question.
That's a good question.
I guess it would probably depend upon what that outcome would be as to what that event was. So certainly events happen to individuals during the course of a trial, and part of the determination is it specifically related to whatever's under investigation, or is it a separate event? And so a lot of that has to be sorted out as part of the trial, because general health events would be covered under your health insurance.
They would be covered under your health insurance. I think as any clinical trial, there is an informed consent that is gone over extensively with every patient before they go into trial. Sometimes our clinical trial navigators will spend up to an hour just going through the informed consent, and I think all those questions are generally answered in the informed consent.
And then another thing maybe to touch on is that for every trial, there's very strict what are called inclusion and exclusion criteria as well. And so those are to make sure that the patient population that participates in the study, one, fits the study design and it's safe for them to be part of the trial. And so that this exclusion criteria will go through very pretty detail to make sure that there's no underlying health condition that might put you at higher risk for what's being studied at the trial. So these are all, so enrolling in a trial, it is a pretty extensive screening to make sure that the trial is appropriate.
And one of the advantages of doing clinical research through the Privia network is we all have access to the chart of the patient before anyone comes in. So we've pretty much looked at all these inclusion, exclusion criteria beforehand. So generally, in our patient population, if someone decides they'd like to participate in a trial, it usually isn't an issue because those exclusion criteria have been gone through. We've had some patients that have come in outside of Privia and where we don't have access to the complete record, and often we'll have to turn those patients away because they don't meet those criteria.
So maybe we should also explain within the Privia group about what this Annapolis Clinical Research Hub looks like, how it's really providers from a number of different local practices within the Privia Medical Group that have come together to participate in these trials. So there's always a clinician involved in the administration of the trial that's part of the screening and monitoring all along. And they're all local providers from local practices that we've all are all working together within the current ongoing trials.
Exactly.
So these are all local providers that are in this local community that we talk with and know. So it's a very collaborative and I think congenial network of local practitioners. So I hope that answers your question. Let's see. We also have here, I'm concerned about yet again receiving another vaccine in addition to the flu shot and the new bivalent COVID vaccine. Any interactions? I think it depends upon what you're talking about participating in, and I think those are all excellent questions. That probably is an individualized question that has to be looked at in the setting of your own clinical conditions.
Well, I think the data from the CDC was that both vaccines could be given together. I think, as a general rule of thumb, you may want to wait a week or so between vaccines if there's a concern to make sure that because if you have an adverse reaction, we just want to know which one it's from. But I don't think there's been any, on a large scale, the data has been that there is not a problem giving those vaccines together.
And part of the study designs for any of the vaccine trials is there is a waiting period for participation in the trial if you've had another vaccine in between. So that part is already kind of built in, that it's depending on the trial, 28 days, so forth, in between any other vaccine that you received and any potential vaccine that you would receive as part of the trial. So that's kind of built in already. But certainly any questions you have about possible adverse reactions and how it might work to you, those are all, very legitimate questions to ask to the team and your provider to make sure that they're appropriate for you. Let's see, do I see any other questions out here as well? I don't know that I see any other new ones there. I think that kind of covers it, just a couple of questions. So I think with that, we'll wrap things up unless there's anything else that you wanted to add to the discussion. I think we really just wanted to have take this time to kind of put something out there. We're going to have this recorded session available just for anyone who's wasn't free to join us right now. We're going to leave this posted recording out there just so our patients can listen and be aware of exactly what this initiative is. And I'm really excited about it. I think it's a really cool endeavor. I'm so glad to be a part of it. I really hope that we can help positively touch the lives of our patients and the greater health community, and look forward to getting started and kind of adding more trials as we go down the road.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming today. I was glad to collaborate with you on this. I'm excited. All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. Have a wonderful afternoon.